The Curse of Chernobyl. It all began on that fateful day, April 26, 1986, when the fourth reactor of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded. The world learned of a disaster whose consequences are still felt today. But among all the known effects of radiation and destruction, there were some that science could not explain. Paranormal phenomena hidden beyond the borders of the abandoned zone. Decades after the disaster, the exclusion zone remained a grim reminder of what had happened. But for Ivan, an experienced stalker, it was home. He knew every path, every corner of this forsaken place. And then one day, he received a strange message from his old friend Alexei, who once worked at the plant. "Ivan, you must come. Something terrifying and inexplicable is happening here," Alexei wrote in his letter. Intrigued and worried, Ivan decided to make the journey. Upon arrival, he noticed that the zone looked even more sinister than on his previous visits. Abandoned buildings, crumbling roads, and nature slowly reclaiming everything. But the main thing was the feeling that someone or something watching his every step. Alexei met him at the gates of an old laboratory. His face was pale, and his eyes were full of fear. "We found something horrifying," he said. Leading Ivan inside, in the dark corridors of the laboratory, there was an eerie silence, broken only by the echo of their footsteps. In one of the rooms, lit only by the dim light of a lamp, stood several scientists. On the table lay a strange artifact, a piece of metal, clearly from the reactor. But the strangest thing was not that. Around the artifact, there was a glow, as if it was emitting light itself. "We discovered this at the very epicenter of the explosion," Alexei said. "But something inexplicable is happening with it. Every night, we hear voices. They come from this artifact." Ivan examined the find closely. He did not believe in ghosts, but voices coming from a piece of metal could not help but impress him. He asked to stay the night to hear these sounds himself. Night engulfed the laboratory, leaving only the faint glow of the artifact. Ivan sat nearby, listening to the silence. Suddenly, it was broken by a whisper. He could not make out the words, but the voices were distinct. They seemed to be asking for help. Ivan stood up and moved closer. The voices grew louder, and now he could make out individual phrases. "Save us. We're here, in the shadows." His heart pounded harder. He realized that these voices were not a figment of his imagination. They were the souls of those who died in the disaster. They were trapped here, in this artifact, and were trying to convey their plea to the living. Ivan decided to act. He knew he had to free them, but how? Alexei suggested trying to destroy the artifact, but Ivan was not sure that would work. He felt there was another way. That night, he had a dream. In it, he stood in the center of the ruined reactor, and before him were people, their faces contorted with pain and fear. One of them, an old man with piercing eyes, approached him and said, "Free us. Bring the artifact back to where it all began." Waking up, Ivan realized it was not just a dream. It was a message. He told Alexei about it, and they decided to take the risk. In the morning, they took the artifact and headed to the heart of the zone, to the destroyed reactor. Approaching the ruins, they felt a chill, as if time had stopped there. Ivan lifted the artifact and stepped forward. The moment he placed it on the ground, something incredible happened. The artifact flashed with bright light, blinding them. The voices grew louder, turning into a loud scream, and then everything went silent. The light disappeared and the artifact crumbled to dust. Ivan felt relieved. The souls were freed. But that was not all. As they returned to the laboratory, they noticed strange shadows flickering at the edges of their vision. The feeling of being watched never left them. When they reached the laboratory, Alexei began to complain of cold, despite the warm weather. Ivan soon realized that they had awakened something else, something darker and more sinister. Every night he had nightmares, grim figures standing over his bed, whispers infiltrating his mind. He knew he had to do something to put an end to it. He began researching the history of Chernobyl, studying old documents and reports. Among them, he found mentions of strange events that occurred even before the disaster. People spoke of shadows moving at night, of strange sounds coming from the reactors. Ivan realized that this place had been cursed long before the explosion. The Chernobyl zone was a gateway to another world, a world of shadows and ghosts. He knew he had to find a way to close this gateway. Returning to the reactor, Ivan brought with him ancient amulets and books found in old archives. He recited spells, read prayers, trying to banish the evil. But the shadows came closer, their whispers louder. In a desperate attempt, he took the last amulet and threw it into the center of the reactor. There was a powerful explosion of light, and the shadows began to disappear, their screams growing fainter. Suddenly, everything went silent. Ivan fell to his knees, exhausted but alive. Returning to the laboratory, he felt that the shadows no longer followed him. He knew the evil had been banished, though the curse of Chernobyl would never fully disappear. The exclusion zone would continue to keep its secrets, and those who dared to enter would have to be prepared for the consequences.